Hey guys, tonight we are heading back in time, and way up in altitude. We're going to the Valley of Mexico, sometime in the late 15th century, to become farmers. Now, I know what you're rethinking. Farming sounds gritty, and you're not wrong. Your new career as an Aztec agriculturalist might be a little more hands-minus on than you're used to, and your chances of finding a decent coffee to start your day are, let's say, slim to none. You'd be lucky to get through the first week without a major culture shock. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where these stories are landing. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thin here, almost 7,500 feet above the sea. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the coolness in your lungs. Before you stretches a vast, shimmering sheet of water, a network of lakes that fills the entire valley floor. This is Lake Texcoco. In the distance, two colossal, snow-capped volcanoes, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, stand like silent guardians against the deep, blue sky. It's beautiful, serene, and almost overwhelmingly vast, but your eyes are drawn to the marvel that sits right in the middle of the lake. It's the city, Tenochtitlan. It doesn't rise from the shore, it rises from the water itself. A metropolis of whitewashed pyramids, temples, and palaces that seem to float on the surface, all connected to the mainland by long, straight causeways that stretch for miles. You can hear a faint hum coming from it, the distant sound of 250,000 people living their lives. It is, without a doubt, one of the largest and most magnificent cities on the planet at this moment. And as you stand here on the marshy edge of the lake, a very practical question begins to bubble up in your mind. How do you feed all those people? There's no vast expanse of golden wheat fields or rolling green pastures. There is only this high -altitude valley, this huge lake, and some steep, forested slopes on the horizon. The logistics seem impossible. A city this size needs a constant, massive supply of food. Where on earth does it all come from? This is, of course, a major historical point. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was an engineering marvel, a testament to human ingenuity in a challenging environment. Its sheer scale and organization baffled the first Europeans who saw it. They compared it to Venice, but its complexity was entirely its own. You see long canoes, like water taxi, gliding along the canals that serve as the city streets, laden with goods. The entire system is built on and reliant upon the water. But as you watch the lake surface, you notice something odd. Not far from the shore, a man in a small, flat bottomed boat is methodically scraping the top of the water with a fine net. He is collecting a fine, greenish blue scum and placing it into a pot. He works with a quiet efficiency that suggests this is a routine task. You watch as he paddles to shore, spreads the green paste onto a flat stone to dry in the sun, and eventually cuts it into little brown green cakes. This, you'll later learn, is called tequitl, and it's a type of spirulina algae. It's incredibly high in protein, and these nutritious, if slightly swampy tasting, cakes are a vital food supplement for the city. It's a perfect example of Aztec resourcefulness. When you live on a lake, you learn to harvest the lake itself. The very nature of this body of water is also something historians still debate. You might look at this enormous lake and assume it's one single entity, but that's not quite right. The leading theory is that Lake Texcoco was actually a system of 5 interconnected lakes with different properties. The southern lakes, Chalco and Zoquismola, where you're standing, were fed by freshwater springs and were full of life. But the northern lakes, including the parts surrounding the city center, were much more saline salty and less suitable for agriculture. Managing this delicate balance of fresh and salt water was a constant challenge for the Aztecs. and their ability to separate and control these waters was key to their survival. You gaze out at the city again, the logistical puzzle still turning over in your mind. You can't farm the steep mountainsides efficiently enough to feed a megacity. You can't crops in the salty parts of the lake, and there isn't enough solid ground nearby. The solution has to be somewhere else. It has to be something new. You look down at the shallow, muddy water lapping at your feet, at the reeds swaying in the gentle breeze. The answer, you begin to suspect, isn't on the land. The answer is the lake itself. Your suspicion hangs in the cool, thin air, a silent question aimed at the shimmering lake. And, as if in answer, a figure emerges from a small hut woven from reeds and mud plaster near the shore. H.E.S. an older man, his face a road map of wrinkles carved by sun and time. But his movements are deliberate and sure. He says nothing to you, merely gestures with his head towards a narrow, dugout canoe and ache, all lie resting at the water's edge. You understand, this is your guide. You climb in, finding your balance as the simple boat rocks beneath you. With a single, powerful push of a long pole against the muddy bottom, you're moving. You glide away from the solid shore, into the labyrinth of waterways. At first, it just feels like you're paddling through a marsh. Reeds and cattles brush against the sides of the canoe. But then, you see them, to your left and right, stretching out in a vast, waterlogged checkerboard, are the answers to your question. They are long, rectangular plots of land, rising a few feet above the water's surface. They are intensely, vibrantly green, bursting with life. On one, you see neat rows of maize stalks. There, green leaves rustling in the breeze. On another, broad minus-leafed squash plants sprawl across the dark soil. Their large yellow blossoms a splash of color. Beans climb up poles, then bright red amaranth stands tall like a tiny, crimson forest. The air here smells different, not of stagnant swamp, but of rich, damp earth, of chlorophyll, of things growing. This, your guide finally says, his voice raspy but clear, is a Chinampa. This is the agricultural engine of the Aztec Empire. The mainstream understanding of this system is that it was one of the most intensive and productive farming methods ever devised by humanity. You're not looking at a farm near the water. You're looking at a farm made from the water. The Aztecs didn't just find fertile land. They built it. They literally constructed new land masses in the shallow parts of the lakes, creating a network of thousands of these incredibly fertile plots. This is why the city can thrive. It is surrounded not by fields, but by an immense, man-made agricultural factory that operates year-minus round. You've probably heard these called floating gardens, and it's a romantic, beautiful image. It's also completely wrong. It's a fun bit of trivia, a misconception that started with the first miners struck outsiders and has stuck around for centuries. Your guide might even give a dry chuckle if you were to suggest it. He pulls the canoe right up to the edge of one of the plots, and you can reach out and touch the side. It's solid, firmly packed mud and decaying plant matter, held in place by a woven latticework of branches. The china pans don't float. They are firmly anchored to the lake bed, extensions of the ground beneath the water, built up layer by painstaking layer. From a distance, surrounded by canals and shimmering water, they create the illusion of floating. But the reality is far more ingenious and far more stable. As you glide through these quiet, green corridors of water, you realize you're in a place that is both city and countryside, a perfect fusion of urban planning and rural life. Men and women tend to their pots, some weeding by hand, others using long handled scoops to dredge water from the canals onto their plants. Children laugh as they chase dragonflies along the edges. It's a peaceful, industrious scene, a world away from the grand, imposing temples you can still see in the distance. The very origin of this incredible system is a matter of ongoing academic debate. Did the Aztecs, in a flash of collective genius, invent the Chinampa from scratch to solve their unique food problem, or were they perfecting a much older idea? Archaeologists have found evidence of similar, though much less extensive, raised field agriculture, used by earlier cultures that inhabited the Valley of Mexico, like those who lived around the ancient city of Teotihuacan. The historical consensus is leaning towards the latter. The Aztecs were likely not the inventors, but the masters. They inherited a clever concept and, driven by the needs of their rapidly expanding empire, scaled it up to an unprecedented level. They refined the techniques, organized the labor, and turned a small minor-scale farming method into the powerhouse that fed the New World's greatest city. The idea might have been old, but the sheer, breathtaking scale of what you see around you, this is pure Aztec innovation. Your guide pulls the canoe into a quieter, more open area of the lake. Here, the water is shallow, the reeds grow thick, and the surface is undisturbed by the wake of other boats. He lets the canoe drift to a stop. The sun is higher in the sky now, warming your shoulders. The silence is broken only by the chirping of unseen birds and the gentle lapping of water against the boat. He points with his pole to an empty patch of water, a space between the reeds. He doesn't need to say a word. You understand. This is where your journey truly begins. You're not just here to see a Chinampa. You're here to build one. The spot your guide has chosen seems unremarkable. It's just an empty patch of water, maybe 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, surrounded by dense reeds. The water is clear enough that you can see the dark, mucky lake bed a few feet below. To you, it looks like any other part of this vast marsh. To your guide, it's a perfect canvas. He dips his long pole into the water at one end of the designated area, then the other, measuring the depth. He nods, satisfied. This is the first, and perhaps most critical, step: site selection. You learn that not just any part of the lake will do. A proper Chinampa requires a very specific set of conditions. The most important factor, you're told, is that it has to be shallow, so deep, and the amount of labor and material required to build the foundation becomes monumental. You'd spend all your energy just trying to reach the surface, with little left for the actual farming. Too shallow, and the canals around your plot won't be deep enough to navigate your canoe, or to provide the crucial, year-minus round water source that the Chinampa relies on. The ideal depth is between 1 and 2 meters, a sweet spot that's manageable to build in and perfect for the resulting ecosystem. Your guide also points towards the reeds. He explains that a location sheltered by existing vegetation is highly desirable. These natural windbreaks help protect the young plants you'll eventually put in, and their root systems help stabilize the surrounding lake bed, preventing the precious mud you'll be piling up from simply washing away in a storm. It's about working with the lake, not against it. You're not clearing a forest to make a field. You're refining a specific niche within the existing environment and transforming it. This fundamental principle of Aztec agriculture of adapting to the environment rather than dominating it is a mainstream historical understanding of their success. They saw the lake not as an obstacle, but as a resource brimming with potential. As you sit there in the gently rocking canoe, soaking in the quiet wisdom of this place, you notice a peculiar detail. Tied to your guide's wrist is a small, carved piece of green stone. He catches you looking at it and holds it up. He explains, through a mix of gestures and simple words, that certain stones and charms are believed to help a farmer feel the spirit of the place. Choosing a site isn't just a practical decision based on depth and shelter. It's a spiritual one, too. You have to find a spot where the water feels right, where the air is calm, where you sense that the earth beneath the water will be generous. It's a small, personal ritual, a piece of folk magic that connects the farmer to the divine forces they believe govern the lake. You're not just choosing a plot of land, you're entering into a partnership with it. This is a cold, hard fact of history that we often overlook, the deeply spiritual and superstitious underpinnings of even the most practical daily activities. You also learn that the placement of your new Chinampa relative to others is carefully considered. You can't just build anywhere. There's a logic to the layer, a design that ensures every plot has adequate access to the main canal routes for transport, and that the flow of water remains healthy and doesn't become stagnant. Building a new Chinampa in the wrong place could disrupt the delicate hydrology of the entire network. affecting your neighbor's plots. There's a communal aspect to it, an unspoken agreement that maintains the health of the whole system. Of course, the academic world is still picking apart the finer details of how this was all managed. Was there a central authority, a sort of office of China, MPA planning, that assigned plots and oversaw the expansion of the agricultural zone? Or was it a more organic, community-led process, with families and clans claiming on developing new areas based on tradition and consensus? There are arguments for both sides. The highly organized nature of the Aztec states suggests some level of top-down control, but the daily reality of farming life points towards a more decentralized, family-based system of land tenure. It's likely the truth lies somewhere in between, a complex blend of imperial oversight and local autonomy that we are still trying to fully understand. Your guide hands you a wooden stake, sharpened to a fine point. It's heavy, solid. He points to a spot in the water, indicating the first corner of your future garden. The sun is warm on your back, the canoe is steady, and the task ahead feels both daunting and sacred. You are about to make your mark on this ancient lake, to draw a rectangle on the water and declare, here, there will be land. Here, there will be food. You take a deep breath, lean over the side of the canoe, and with all your strength, you drive the first stake down into the soft, yielding mud of the lake bed. The work has begun. The first stake stands awkwardly in the water, a lone wooden finger pointing at the sky. It seems insignificant, almost foolish, but it's a beginning. Your guide hands you another stake, and another, and you paddle the short distance to the next corner of the imaginary rectangle you've outlined on the water. Plunge. The stake sinks into the mud with a satisfying take thump. You repeat the process, marking all four corners of what will become your plot. It's a simple, physical act, but it feels monumental. You are defining a space, imposing a human geometry onto the wild, organic shape of the lake. Now the real labor starts. Your guide pulls the canoe to a dense thicket of reeds and trees, growing on a larger, more established china MPA nearby. He begins to harvest long, flexible branches from a specific type of willow tree. The jot the same tree you'll eventually plant at the corners of your own pot. He also gathers bundles of reeds and other sturdy, pliable water plants. This is your construction material. There's no hardware store, no treated lumber. Everything you need to build your garden, you harvest from the garden itself. You return to your marked -out rectangle. The task is to create a sturdy frame, a kind of underwater fence that will contain the tons of mud and organic matter. You're about to pile into it. Starting from one corner, you begin to drive more stakes into the lake bed, placing them every foot or so along the perimeter you've established. Thump, thump, thump. It's rhythmic, repetitive work. Your shoulders begin to ache. The sun beats down, reflecting off the water's surface. You quickly learn to brace yourself against the side of the canoe with each push, using your body weight to drive the stakes deep enough so they won't wobble. This is the foundational technique of China MPA construction, a key historical point that every student of Aztec engineering learns about. This framework, this water fence, is the skeleton of the China MPA. It has to be strong enough to withstand the immense pressure of the fill material from the inside and the constant presence of water on the outside. It's a testament to their understanding of natural materials and simple physics. Without this meticulously constructed cave, your future garden would simply dissolve back into the lake. Once the entire perimeter is studded with these vertical stakes, the next step begins weaving. You take the long, flexible willow branches and begin to thread them between the stakes, alternating them in an over-under pattern, just like weaving a giant basket. You start at the bottom, just above the lake bed, pushing the branches deep into the water and mud, and slowly work your way out. It's awkward, wet work. You have to lean far over the side of the canoe, your arms submerged to the elbows in the cool water. Your guide shows you how to pull each branch taut, ensuring there are no gaps. After the main branches are in place, you weave in the tougher reeds and other fibrous plants, creating a thick, dense wall of organic material. Here's a quirky little detail you might not think about: the smell. As you work, stirring up the bottom of the lake, you release a deep, earthy, almost sulphurous scent. It's the smell of anaerobic decomposition, of centuries of organic matter breaking down without oxygen. It's not exactly pleasant, but to an experienced China MPA farmer, it's the smell of fertility. That pungent aroma is a sign of the nutrient-minus rich sediment that will soon become the lifeblood of your garden. You also have to be mindful of the lake's inhabitants. Tiny fish dart away from your hands, and you might occasionally brush against a startled frog or a placid water snake. You're not just building in the water, you're cohabiting with an entire ecosystem. The precise combination of materials used in this wattle fence is something historians still study closely. While willow was a primary component due to its flexibility and drop-minus resistance, archaeological evidence suggests the Aztecs were masters of material science, using a specific blend of local plants depending on the location. Was there a universally agreed minus upon best recipe for the wattle? Or did each family have its own secret techniques passed down through generations? Some scholars argue for a highly standardized method, pointing to the uniformity of China palms across the valley. Others suggest a more localized, adaptable approach, where farmers used the best materials immediately available to them. This debate highlights the difference between an empire-wide standard and the practical, un-the ground knowledge of the individual farmer. Day after day, you work on the frame. It's slow, methodical progress. The woven walls gradually rise from the water, first a few inches, then a foot. It begins to look less like a random collection of sticks and more like a deliberate structure. It's a box, a long, rectangular, water-oak box, sitting in the middle of the lake. It's still empty, a hollow promise, but the container is now ready. The next step is to fill it, to give the skeleton its body and its soul, and that will require getting much muddier. The woven frame of your China MPA now sits patiently in the water, an empty vessel waiting to be filled. Hard physical labor of building the cage is done, but the truly transformative work is about to begin. Your guide pulls the canoe into the canal that is forming between your new pot and the shore. He hands you a tool you haven't used before. It's a long wooden pole with a sturdy, net-like bag attached to the end, reinforced with a wooden ring. It looks like a giant lacrosse stick or an oversized butterfly net. This is ultimately the essential tool for the next stage of your project. Your task is simple in concept, but grueling in practice. You are going to dredge the bottom of the canal and fill your China MPA with the nutrient-minus rich sediment from the lake bed. This is the core principle of the China palm's fertility. You're not just using the mud as fill. You are harvesting the single most valuable resource the lake has to offer. For centuries, fish waste, decaying algae, and organic runoff from the surrounding land have been settling at the bottom of these lakes, creating a thick, dark layer of what is essentially super-minus compost. This is the black gold of the Aztec world. Your guide demonstrates the technique. He stands at the edge of his canoe, braces his feet, and plunges the awkwardly deep into the water until it hits the bottom. With a practiced twist and pull, he scoops up a heavy load of dark, sludgy mud. Water streams from the net as he lifts it. Then, with a grunt of effort, he swings the pole over the woven wall of your China MPI and empties the contents inside. The thick, wet mud lands with a heavy, satisfying splat. Now it's your turn. You try to imitate his movements, but your first attempt is clumsy. The pole is unwieldy, and the scoop of mud is shockingly heavy. You struggle to lift it, the canoe rocking precariously. You manage to swing it over the wall, but half of the mud drips back into the canal. Your guide watches with a patient, uncritical eye. This is a skill honed over a lifetime. You try again, and again. Slowly, you find a rhythm. Plunge, scoop, lift, pivot, empty. Plunge, scoop, lift, pivot, empty. It's a full minus body workout, engaging your legs, core, and arms. This process is the central historical fact of how a China MPA was made. It's an act of creation and maintenance rolled into one. By scooping mud from the canal to build the Chinampa, you are simultaneously deepening the waterway. This ensures the canals remain navigable for canoe traffic and deep enough to act as a thermal regulator, keeping the Chinampa's roots cool in the heat and preventing them from freezing during the occasional cold snap. It's a perfectly symbiotic system. Building the farm improves the infrastructure that supports it. As you work, you uncover all sorts of things from the lake bed. This is a fun and slightly gross part of the job. You'll scoop up wriggling worms, snails, and the larvae of various insects, all of which are a welcome addition to your garden soil, a sign of a healthy ecosystem. You might also find things left behind by others, a broken piece of pottery, a discarded obsidian blade fragment, or even a carved bone needle. The lake bed is a repository of history, and with each scoop, you're pulling up not just mud, but tiny echoes of the past. It's a very weird, hence minus on form of archaeology, a fascinating question that historians and soil scientists continue to explore is the precise composition of this prized mud. We know it was rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential plant nutrients, but what gave it its legendary fertility? Some recent studies, using soil samples from the few remaining China palms in Sakismoa, have focused on the incredible microbial diversity within the mud. They found a complex community of bacteria and fungi that work to break down organic matter and make nutrients available to the plants. It's believed the Aztecs, through centuries of observation, instinctively understood how to foster this microbial life. They weren't just moving dirt. They were transplanting an entire living ecosystem. The debate continues over whether this was pure luck or a form of pro-to-minus scientific understanding of soil health. Hour after hour, day after day, you and your guide scoop and dump. The pile of mud inside the woven frame grows steadily. At first, it's just a dark, soupy mess, but as you add more, the solid matter begins to displace the water. A mound of black earth appears in the center, slowly spreading outwards. Eventually, the mud reaches the top of the water level inside the frame, and then, miraculously, breaks the surface. You have made land. It's a tiny, muddy island, smelling of decay and life, sitting in the middle of a high minus altitude lake. It's not pretty, it's not me, but it is yours. You pause, leaning on the pole of yours awkwardly, muscles aching, hands caked in drying mud, and you look at the new earth you have raised from the water. Your newly formed island of mud is a fragile, soggy achievement. It's barely land, more like a thick pudding held in place by its woven cage. If you tried to stand on it now, you'd sink to your knees. It needs time to settle and drain, but more importantly, it needs to be anchored. It needs roots. Your guide pulls the canoe away from the plot, heading towards a small, dedicated nursery on a nearby, well-minus established Chinampa. Here, growing in neat rows, are dozens of young, slender saplings. These are a huge arty willows, the same trees you harvested branches from to build your frame. He selects four of the healthiest minus-looking saplings. They are young, perhaps only a year or two old, but their root balls are dense and fibrous. This is the next crucial step, a living piece of engineering that will ensure your Chinampa lasts for generations. You paddle back to your plot, the four precious trees lying carefully in the bottom of the canoe. The task is to plant one sapling at each of the four corners of your rectangular island. This is harder than it sounds. You can't just dig a hole. You have to carefully work the root ball down into the semi-minus liquid mud, pushing it deep so it can find purchase in the original lake bed beneath your new fill. Your guide shows you how to gently, but firmly press the young tree down, maneuvering it through the thick slurry until it feels solid. You do this at each corner. The slender, with minus-like trees now standing like sentinels guarding your plot. This is a fundamental piece of the Chinampa puzzle, a key piece of historical knowledge. The Hujati willow Salix Pomplin Diana was specifically chosen for this purpose for several reasons. Firstly, it loves water. Its roots actively seek out moisture, so it thrives in this super-minus, hydrated environment. Secondly, It grows relatively quickly, but most importantly, its roots are incredibly strong and dense. Over the coming years, the root systems of these four-corner trees will spread and interlock deep in the lake bed, forming a powerful, living anchor. They will also spread laterally, their roots weaving through the fill material of the Chinampa itself, binding the soil together and preventing erosion from within. This is Aztec bio-engineering. They weren't just using dead wood to build. They were incorporating living, growing elements into the very structure of their creation. Here's a fantastic cold-water fact for you. The ahujati is not just a structural element, it's also a renewable resource. The Aztecs would regularly prune these trees, a practice known as pollarding. They would cut the upper branches for firewood or to harvest more flexible with S, for weaving new Chinampa frames, all without killing the tree. The tree would simply regrow new branches from the prune spot. So your four-corner anchors also served as a sustainable, perpetual source of construction materials and fuel. It's a closed-loop system of incredible efficiency. You plant the tree to secure your farm, and the tree then provides the materials you need to build another farm. You stand back well. You float back in your canoe and admire your world. The four willows look a bit lonely, but they have a purpose. They are a promise of future stability. You also begin to layer other materials on top of the mud. Your guide brings bundles of dried water hyacinths and other aquatic weeds that have been composting on the shore. You spread this organic matter across the surface of your Chinampa. This layer helps to soak up excess moisture, adds another blast of nutrients, and creates a more stable, mulch-like surface to work on. It's like adding a layer of protective skin to your new land. The long-term ecological impact of planting thousands of these specific willow trees across the lake system is a topic that still generates academic discussion. On one hand, it was a monoculture of sorts, replacing the natural diversity of marshland plants with a single, dominant species in these specific locations. Some ecologists argue this could have had unforeseen consequences for the native fauna that relied on the original vegetation. On the other hand, this network of trees created a unique, human-managed first ecosystem that was incredibly stable and productive. It supported a different, but still rich, web of life, including birds that would nest in the branches and fish that would shelter among the submerged roots. Historians and ecologists are still trying to weigh the trade-offs to understand if this was a net positive for the valley's biodiversity or a significant alteration that favored human needs above all else. The sun is beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows from the volcanoes across the lake. The air grows cooler. Your work for the day is done. The mud is settling. The cornerstones are planted. Your Chinampa is no longer just a pile of dirt. It is now a living structure, anchored by roots, breathing with the potential of the rich soil and the promise of the trees that hold it all together. For the first time, you look at this muddy rectangle and see not just what it is, but what it will become. Weeks pass, or maybe it's a month. Time on the Chinampa flows differently, measured not by a calendar on a wall but by the slow, almost imperceptible changes in the earth beneath your feet. You visit your plot daily, not to work, but to watch. You glide your canoe along its sides, observing how it settles. The water that was trapped within the mud has slowly seeped out, and the surface level has dropped slightly, becoming denser, more solid. The four young willow trees you planted have taken root. You can see tiny new leaves sprouting from their branches, a vibrant green against the dark, black soil. Landboarding. You push your canoe against the side of the Chinampa and, with a bit of hesitation, you step out. The ground is soft, spongy like a thick mattress, but it holds your weight. You take a few tentative steps. It's an incredible feeling. You are standing on land that did not exist a few weeks ago. You are walking on the bed of a lake, elevated by your own labor. You can feel the coolness of the water below through the soles of your simple sandals. The surface is not perfectly flat. It's a lumpy, uneven expanse of rich, black earth, studded with bits of decaying vegetation and the occasional snail shell you dredged up from the bottom. Your guide joins you, his bare feet making soft imprints on the soil. He hands you a simple wooden tool, something like a hoe or a rake. The task now is to sculpt this roll. To give it its final, functional form, you begin to break up the larger clumps of mud, smoothing the surface, creating a slight crown in the middle that slopes gently towards the edges. This is important for drainage, ensuring that rainwater doesn't pool in the center and oversaturate the soil. This is the final stage of construction, the point where the Chinampa transforms from a construction project into a garden bed. This is a well-documented historical process. The Aztecs were meticulous in their preparation of the soil. They understood that the physical structure of the planting surface was just as important as its chemical composition. A well-distilled, properly leveled bed allows for uniform water absorption and root growth, maximizing the potential of every square foot of the plot. You are essentially creating a gigantic, perfectly prepared planter box. As you work the soil, you notice something fascinating. The very top layer of the Chinampa, the part that was exposed to the air and sun, has a different texture. It's lighter, more crumbly, but just an inch or two down. The soil is incredibly dark, moist, and dense. This is where the real magic is. Your guide shows you how to mix in one final ingredient: human waste. This might sound shocking to our modern sensibilities, but it's a critical, if often overlooked, piece of the puzzle. The Aztecs had a highly organized system for collecting human manure from the city of Tenochtitlan. It was collected by special boats, transported out to the Chinampa, and allowed to age and compost before being mixed into the soil as a powerful fertilizer. This is a weird but true historical fact. The Aztecs practiced a form of closed-minded limitation and agriculture that modern cities are only now beginning to reconsider. They saw waste not as a problem to be disposed of, but as a valuable resource to be reintegrated into the food system. Your Chinampa is now complete. It's a perfect rectangle of potential, about 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, rising a couple of feet above the shimmering canal. Its edges are sharp and defined, reinforced by the woven wattle and the living roots of the willows. The surface is a pristine canvas of dark, rich, almost black soil. It smells of damp earth, of life, of immense fertility. It sits there, waiting. It is a machine designed for one purpose: to grow things. But what exactly constituted the perfect Chinampa soil? This is a topic of ongoing academic research. While we know the basic ingredients like bed mud, composted vegetation, and aged manure, the exact recipe remains elusive. Did they have a specific ratio they aimed for? Did the recipe change depending on what crop they intended to plant? Soil scientists analyzing core samples from surviving Chinampas have found varying levels of organic matter and different chemical compositions from one plot to another. This suggests that there wasn't a single, universal formula. Instead, Chinampa farmers were likely highly skilled soil managers, constantly adjusting their inputs based on observation, experience, and the specific needs of their plants. The debate continues whether this was a codified science with rules and measures, or a more intuitive, artisanal craft passed down through families. You stand in the middle of your creation, the soft earth yielding slightly under your feet. The sun warms your back. The gentle sound of water lapping against the sides is the only noise. For a moment, the immense city in the distance, the grand temples and the bustling markets, all fade away. There is only this small patch of black earth. It's an empty stage. All the preparation, the sweat, the planning, it has all lead to this quiet, expectant moment. The garden is ready. Now, that means seeds. Now that your Chinampa is a pristine, empty bed of black soil, you might assume the next step is to simply poke some holes and drop in seeds. That would be a waste of good land and precious time. The Aztec system is far more efficient than that. You don't plant seeds directly into the Chinampa. You bring its seedlings that are already healthy and strong. Your guide leads you away from your new plot to a different, very special part of an older, established Chinampa. It's a small, shaded area, set aside specifically for one purpose: germination. There, You see another masterclass in agricultural ingenuity. Your guide takes some of the same rich, black mud from the canal floor, but places it not on the Chinampa, but on a woven reed mat. He works the mud with his hands, adding a little water, kneading it until it has the consistency of thick clay. Then, he flattens it out into a shallow, square bed, about an inch thick, with a sharp piece of obsidian. He carefully cuts a grid into the surface of the mud bed, creating dozens of small, perfectly uniform cubes, like a tray of earthy brownies. This is a seed bed, known in the Nehutal language as a. This is where a plant's life begins. Your guide then takes a small pouch from his belt. Inside are seeds, tiny, precious specks of potential life, with incredible delicacy. He uses a small twig to press a single seed into the center of each mud cube. One seed, one cube. He covers it with a pinch of dry, pulverized soil. He then takes another reed mat and lays it gently over the entire seedbed, providing shade from the harsh sun and protection from hungry birds. This process is a well-documented aspect of China MPA farming. It's essentially a pre-minus industrial greenhouse system. By starting seeds in these protected, concentrated nurseries, the Aztecs could control the conditions for germination much more effectively. The mud cubes provided a perfect, nutrient-rich environment for the seed to sprout, and the farmer could ensure they received just the right amount of water and sunlight. This dramatically increased the success rate of germination compared to direct sowing. More importantly, it was a huge time-saver. While one crop was still growing on the main China MPA, the next crop could already be starting its life in the nursery. It allowed for a seamless, continuous cycle of planting and harvesting. A curious little detail of this process is the almost reverential way the seeds are handled. Your guide doesn't just dump them out. He seems to be choosing each seed individually, inspecting it for a brief moment before planting. Ancient Aztec beliefs held that seeds possessed a tiny spark of divine energy. They weren't just inert objects. They were sleeping life forms that needed to be coaxed awake with care and respect. This act of planting a seed in the nursery mud was a small but significant ritual, a quiet prayer for a successful life for the plant. You might even see a farmer whisper a few words to the seeds before pressing them into the mud, a personal appeal to the gods of fertility and growth. Once the seeds are planted in their mud cubes, the waiting begins. The bed is kept consistently moist, using water sprinkled carefully from a gourd. In a few days, tiny green shoots begin to push their way out of the cubes. Over the next week or two, these shoots grow into small but sturdy seedlings, each with its own self-contained, nutrient-packed cube of soil around its roots. The science behind why these mud cubes were so effective is something researchers still marvel at. The cubes did more than just provide nutrients. They also pruned the roots. As the seedlings' roots grew to the edge of the cube, they would be exposed to the air, which would cause the tip to stop growing and encourage the plant to send out more secondary, fibrous roots within the cube itself. This created an incredibly dense, strong root ball. When it was time to transplant, the entire cube could be lifted and planted without causing any shock or damage to the plant's root system. The seedling would barely even notice it had been moved, and could immediately start growing in its new home. The debate among botanists and historians is whether the Aztecs understood the scientific principle of pruning, or if they simply knew, through generations of trial and error, that this specific method produced the strongest, most resilient seedlings. The day finally comes when the seedlings are ready. They are a few inches tall. Their leaves are healthy, vibrant green, and their roots have filled their individual mud cubes. Your guide carefully lifts one of the cubes from the nursery bed. It holds its shape perfectly. He hands it to you. It feels solid, alive. You carry this small block of life back to your own China MPA, the one you built from the lake itself. The stage is no longer empty. The first actor is ready to make its entrance. You stand on your China MPA, holding the small, perfect mud cube with its vibrant green seedling. The soil beneath your feet is ready. The young plant in your hand is ready. Now you must decide where and when to plant it. This isn't a random choice. An Aztec farmer doesn't just plant whatever they feel like, whenever they feel like it. Your entire year is governed by a complex, sophisticated, and deeply ingrained planting schedule. Your guide explains, using the sun's position and the feel of the air as his reference points, that the year is divided into several planting and harvesting seasons, because the China palms have a constant supply of water from the canals and incredibly fertile, self-renewing soil. You aren't limited to a single harvest like farmers in other parts of the world. Here, in this agricultural paradise, you can expect to get up to 7 different harvests a year from a single plot. This astonishing productivity is a cornerstone of the historical understanding of how the Aztec Empire fed itself. It was an agricultural factory running 24/7, 365 days a year. The schedule is dictated by a few key factors: the type of crop, the length of its growing cycle, and the subtle shifts in the high-altitude climate. For example, you'll plant your staple crops like maize at specific times to ensure they mature during the warmest, sunniest part of the year. But in the cooler, drier months, you'll plant other, hardier crops like amaranth or tomatoes that can tolerate the slight dip in temperature. Flowers, which are incredibly important for rituals in the mark, have their own dedicated planting windows to ensure they are blooming for specific religious festivals. It's a dizzying mental calendar that every Chinampa farmer has memorized. They know that when the shadow of the great temple of Histiputic touches a certain point on the causeway at sunrise, it's time to transplant the chili pepper seedlings. They know that when a particular constellation appears in the night sky, the squash harvest should begin. This calendar is a blend of precise astronomical observation and generations of accumulated agricultural wisdom. You don't have a smartphone app to remind you. You have the cosmos and the collective knowledge of your ancestors. As you prepare to plant your first seedling, you learn about a very clever and quirky technique for spacing. Your guide doesn't use a measuring tape. Instead, he uses his own foot. He places his heel at the edge of the Chinampa and marks where his toe lands. That's the first row. Then he walks the length of the plot, his feet marking out the distance between each plant in the row. It's a personalized, build-in unit of measurement. This means that every farmer's Chinampa is spaced slightly differently, tailored to their own body. It's a surprisingly intimate and human-scaled system for organizing a farm. With the spacing mark, the actual planting is simple. You use your fingers or a small pointed stick to scoop out a hole in the soft earth, just large enough to fit the mud cube. You place the entire cube into the hole, ensuring the top of the cube is flush with the surface of the Chinampa. Then you gently pack the surrounding soil around it. That's it. No fuss, no mess. The seedling is now home. You repeat the process, planting seedling after seedling in neat, perfectly spaced rows. You finish planting the first set of seedlings. The neat rows of green stand out against the black soil, a testament to your careful work. But the Chinampa is far from full. You've only planted one type of crop. This isn't a monoculture operation, the real genius of the system. The next layer of complexity and elegance comes from what you plant next, right alongside these first seedlings. The Chinampa is not just a field for one crop. It's a carefully orchestrated polyculture, a community of plants designed to help each other thrive. The most important of these communities is about to arrive. With your first crop of seedlings nestled in their new home, you might think it's time to plant something else in a different section, but your guide stops you. He gestures to the empty spaces between the seedlings you just planted. The Chinampa, he explains, is not about isolating plants. It's about creating a family. And now, it's time to introduce the most important family of all. He hands you 2 more types of seeds from his pouch. One is a variety of dried bean, and the other is a small, hard squash seed. You are about to plant the 3 sisters, the legendary trio of maize, beans, and squash. This is one of the most famous and widespread agricultural systems in the Americas, and the Aztecs perfected its use on their China palms. You already have your maize seedlings in place. Let's assume your first planting was the all-important corn. Now, You move along the rows. A few inches away from the base of each young maize plant, you carefully push a single bean seed into the soft earth. Then, in the wider spaces between the rows of maize, you plant the squash seeds. It seems a bit crowded, a little haphazard compared to the neat monoculture fields you might be used to imagining, but this is a masterpiece of symbiotic agriculture, a core tenet of indigenous farming knowledge. The three plants work together in a mutually beneficial relationship. The maize grows tall and strong, providing a natural pole for the bean vines to climb. The beans, in turn, are legumes. They have a special ability to take nitrogen from the earth through bacteria on their roots, fix it into the soil, converting it into a form that plants can use. They are natural fertilizers, constantly enriching the soil and feeding the nutrient-minus hungry maize. Finally, the squash plants, with their broad, sprawling leaves, act as a living mulch. They spread out across the ground, shading the soil, which helps retain moisture and prevents weeds from growing. Their prickly leaves also help to deter some animal pests. Each plant helps the others. Together, they create a small, self-sustaining ecosystem that is more resilient and productive than any of the three could be on its own. It's a system that provides a nearly complete nutritional package. The maize provides carbohydrates. The beans are rich in protein, and the squash offers a wealth of vitamins and minerals. This isn't just farming, it's ecological design. As you plant, your guide tells you a little story, a piece of folklore that accompanies the three sisters. The plants are seen as the spirits of three beautiful sisters who could never bear to be apart. One was tolerant and amazed. Another was clever and adaptable, always clinging to her tall sister for support beans. And the third was stout and protective, guarding her siblings from harm squash. This story is a quirky and charming way of encoding vital agricultural knowledge. By telling the story, you pass on the instructions, plant them together, for they are family and will help each other grow. It transforms a practical farming technique into a cultural narrative, making it easier to remember and respect. But the three sisters weren't the only plants on the Chinampa. Your guide now brings out seedlings of amaranth, with its striking reddish leaves, and tomatoes tomato, and chili peppers chili. You intersperse these among the three sisters. This is a practice known as polyculture or companion planting. The Aztecs were masters of it. They knew that planting certain flowers, like marigolds, sea, hempasagil, among their vegetables would repel harmful nematodes in the soil. They knew that the strong scent of certain herbs could confuse pests looking for your precious tomato plants. The Chinampa becomes a dense, complex tapestry of different species, heights, colors, and textures. The exact complexity and combination of these polyculture systems is a subject of ongoing academic inquiry. Ethnobotanists and archaeologists are still trying to reconstruct the full vocabulary of Aztec companion planting. We know the big ones, like the three sisters. What about the more subtle combinations? Was there a specific herb they always planted next to their chili peppers to enhance their growth or flavor? Did certain flower combinations do more than just look pretty, perhaps attracting specific pollinators at different times? The Spanish chroniclers who documented Aztec life were amazed by the productivity of the China palms, but they often failed to record these finer details of agricultural science, which they may have dismissed as simple peasant traditions. Reclaiming that lost knowledge is a slow process of analyzing pollen samples from archaeological sites and studying the traditional practices of modern-day indigenous farmers in Mexico. You step back and look at your work. The once empty Chinampa is now teeming with the promise of life. It's no longer a neat, orderly grid. It's a chaotic, beautiful jungle in miniature. Maize stalks stand next to bean seeds, which are neighbors to squash, tomatoes, and amaranth. It looks messy, but you're beginning to understand the intricate logic at play. You've not just planted crops, you've planted a community. No, this community needs one more thing to thrive: water. Your Chinampa is planted, a dense miniature forest of potential food. The sun is bright and the air is warm, and the young plants are thirsty. You might think it's time to grab a bucket or a watering can, But on a China MPA, you don't bring water to the plants. The plants are already sitting in a bathtub full of it. The key is not watering, but hydration. Your job is to manage the constant, passive supply of moisture that the China MPA is designed to provide. The secret is the high water table within your man-made island. The canals that surround your plot are not just for transportation. They are your irrigation system. The water from the canals is constantly seeping into the porous soil of the China MPA through capillary action. Think of it like a giant sponge. The bottom layers of your China MPA are fully saturated, and this moisture is wicked up towards the surface, creating a zone of perfectly damp soil right where the plant's roots are. This is a core principle of China MPA science and a well-understood historical fact. It's a self-watering planter on a massive scale, which eliminated the back-breaking labor of carrying water to the fields. Your guide shows you how to check the moisture level. He doesn't use any fancy tools. He just digs his fingers a few inches into the soil. He shows you the color and feel of perfectly hydrated earth tar, cool to the touch, and crumbly, not muddy or dusty. He explains that the goal is to keep the root zone consistently moist, but not waterlogged. Too much water can be just as bad as too little, as it can drown the roots and promote rot. So, if the system is self-watering, what's your job? Your job is to be a manager, a fine-tuner, during particularly hot and dry spells. The rate of evaporation from the surface might outpace the capillary action from below. On these days, you do need to add a little water to the top, but you don't use a bucket. That would be too harsh and could displace the soil. Instead, your guide shows you the proper tool along, hollowed-out gourd attached to a stick. You dip the gourd into the canal, lift it, and with a gentle flick of the wrist, you cast a fine spray of water over the plants, mimicking a soft train. It's a delicate, almost graceful movement. You're not drenching the plants. You're just giving them a little drink and raising the humidity around their leaves. Here's a quirky and rather brilliant detail about water management on the China palms. The canals themselves were a part of the nutrient cycle. They were full of aquatic life, including fish and amphibians, and their waste products enriched the water. They were also home to certain types of aquatic plants, like duckweed, which the farmers would periodically scoop out and add to the top of the China MPA as a green manure. So when you sprinkle water from the canal onto your plants, you're not just hydrating them, you're giving them a dose of fertilizer tea, packed with dissolved nutrients. It's another example of the elegant, closed-loop design of the system. You also learn to read the plants themselves. The leaves of a healthy, well-hydrated maize plant stand up, open to the sun. If they start to curl or wilt, you know the plant is thirsty. The color of the squash leaves tells you if they are getting the right balance of nutrients from the water. You develop an intimate relationship with your crops, learning their language of health and distress. Of course, the nature of the water itself is a topic of intense study and some debate among hydrologists and historians. The Aztec engineers built a complex system of dikes and sluice gates to manage the water levels of the entire lake system. The famous Methodical dike, a massive earthen wall that stretched for nearly 10 miles, was built to separate the brackish, salty water of Lake Texcoco from the freshwater springs that fed the southern lakes of Chaco and Zacasmola, where most of the China palms were. This was a monumental piece of hydro-engineering. The debate continues, however, on how effectively this system worked on a micro-level. Did some China palms still struggle with slightly saline water seeping in? Did farmers have techniques to mitigate salt buildup in the soil, perhaps by periodically flushing their plots or adding specific organic matter? The general consensus is that the system was remarkably effective. But the day challenges and solutions for an individual farmer are still being pieced together from a combination of archaeological evidence and ecological modeling. You spend the afternoon gently casting water onto your young plants, the rhythmic splash of the gourd becoming a soothing, meditative sound. You're not just a farmer, you're a water bearer, a guardian of the delicate balance between the wet world of the canal and the earthy world of the China MPA. You watch as droplets cling to the green leaves, sparkling in the sun. Your garden is drinking, and you can almost feel it growing, moment by moment. Your garden is growing beautifully. The maize stalks are getting taller by the day. The bean vines are starting to reach out for them, and the squash leaves are unfurling across the dark soil. The constant moisture and rich nutrients are working their magic. But you are not the only one who appreciates this bounty. You soon discover that your Chinampa is a very popular restaurant for a wide variety of uninvited guests. One morning, you arrive to find tiny holes chewed in the leaves of your young chili plants. A closer inspection reveals a cluster of small, green caterpillars happily munching away. You'll also find aphids congregating on the tender new growth of the beanstalks, and you might see birds swooping down to peck at sprouting seeds. Your job as a Chinampa farmer has now expanded from builder and water minus manager to full minus time security guard. But you don't have a shed full of chemical pesticides. Instead, you have a deep, ancestral knowledge of organic pest control. This is a major point of historical interest, as Aztec agriculture was, by necessity, entirely organic. They had to rely on observation, biological controls, and natural deterrents to protect their crops. Your guide, a master of this craft, begins to show you the tricks of the trade. For the caterpillars, he shows you the most direct method. You pick them off by hand, one by one. It's tedious work, but it's effective and ensures you don't harm any beneficial insects. You learn to check the undersides of leaves, where they often hide from the sun. For the aphids, he prepares a special concoction. He takes a handful of chili peppers and a few cloves of a wild, pungent garlic minus-like plant, mashes them up with water, and lets it steep for a while. He then strains the liquid into a gourd. This fiery, smelly water is a potent natural insecticide. You sprinkle it on the affected plants. It doesn't kill the aphids, but they hate the taste and smell, and most of them will quickly pack their bags and leave. You also learn to work with nature, not against it. Your guide points out a spitterbear glistening with dew between two maize stalks. He tells you to leave it be. Spiders are valuable allies, catching countless flying pests. You'll see ladybugs crawling on the squash leaves and learn that they are voracious predators of aphids. Part of your job is to create a welcoming environment for these beneficial insects. This is why the pollinator system is so important. The variety of plants and flowers on your China MPI attracts a diverse range of predators, creating a self-regulating system where pests are kept in check by their natural enemies. One of the most peculiar and fascinating pest-control methods is something you might call scarecrow technology. But instead of a straw man, you use shiny, reflective object. Your guide might tie strips of a shiny mineral like mica, or even just polished shells, to strings and hang them over the China MPA. The flashing, unpredictable glints of light as they twist in the wind can startle birds and other larger animals, scaring them away from your precious seedlings. It's a simple, low-tech, but surprisingly effective deterrent. You also discover that the canals themselves are part of your defense system. The water acts as a natural moat, preventing many ground-minus crawling pests from simply walking onto your plot. You might even see your guide encouraging certain types of frogs and small water birds to hang around your China MPA, as they feast on slugs and insects that live at the water's edge. The exact recipes for these ancient pesticides and the full extent of the Aztecs' understanding of biological controls are still subjects of academic research. While chronicles mention the use of bitter and pungent plant extracts, the specific formulas were likely trade secrets, passed down within farming families. Ethnobotanists today work with indigenous communities in Mexico to document the use of traditional plant-based pesticides, trying to see if these modern practices have roots in ancient Aztec knowledge. The debate continues over the true efficacy of some of these methods. Were they highly effective solutions, or were they just part of a larger strategy where a certain amount of crop loss to pests was simply accepted as inevitable? It's likely a bit of both. The goal was to eradicate every single pest, but to maintain a healthy balance where the garden could thrive despite their presence. As you patrol your China MPA, picking off a caterpillar here, sprinkling some chilly water there. You feel like a shepherd tending a flock. You are the guardian of this little green world. It's a constant, quiet battle, a daily negotiation with the forces of nature that want to share in your harvest. You are not dominating the ecosystem. You are an active participant within it, gently nudging the balance in your favor. The health of your plants is a direct reflection of your own vigilance and your growing understanding of the subtle, complex web of life on your island farm. As your Chinampa flourishes, you become focused on the food. You check the growth of the maize, the swelling of the squash, the formation of tiny green tomatoes. This is, after all, the primary purpose of this land you built to feed yourself, your family, on the great city in the distance. But one day, your guide brings a new set of seedlings from the nursery. When you look at the small green shoots, you don't recognize them as any vegetable you've planted so far. He gestures to a special, reserved section of your Chinampa, a sunny spot near the edge. This space, he explains, is not for your stomach. It's for the gods. You are planting flowers. This might seem like a luxury, a waste of incredibly valuable agricultural real estate. But in the Aztec world, flowers were anything but frivolous. They were an essential crop, deeply woven into the fabric of ritual, social life, and the economy. This is a crucial historical point that is often underestimated. The Chinapams were not just vegetable factories, they were also immense flower gardens, producing millions of blossoms for a culture that was obsessed with them. You carefully transplant the seedlings. There are marigolds, or cempasúchil, whose fiery or injured yellow heads are considered the flower of the dead, essential for rituals honoring ancestors. You plant dahlias, with their stunning, complex geometry, a flower so prized it was grown in the royal gardens of Moctezuma himself. You plant roses, whose intoxicating sweet scent will be used to make perfumes and to adorn festival participants. You plant bright red salvias and brilliant blue lupinus, turning a corner of your Chinampa into a riot of future color. Tending to the flowers requires a different kind of care. They're often more delicate than the hardy vegetable plants. You learn to shield them from the harshest midday sun and to give them just the right amount of water to produce vibrant, perfect blossoms. The goal here is not size or quantity, but aesthetic perfection. A torn petal or a discolored leaf can render a flower useless for important rituals. Here's a wonderfully weird and specific detail about the Aztec love of flowers. They had a concept known as Xochipilli, which means flower prince, who was the god of art, games, beauty, dance, and flowers. But they also had a darker, more intoxicating side to their floral obsession. Certain flowers, like the morning glory, were known to have hallucinogenic properties. The seeds of some varieties were ground and consumed in carefully controlled ritual contexts by priests to communicate with the gods and see into the future. So your little flower patch could potentially contain plants that were not just beautiful, but were considered powerful, mind-altering sacred tools. Your Chinampa is now growing not just food for the body, but also food for the soul and gateways to other realms. The market for flowers was enormous. The great temples were constantly being decorated with massive floral arrangements for ceremonies. Priests and nobles wore garlands of fresh flowers. Victories in battle were celebrated with showers of petals. You could make a very good living as a Chinampa farmer by specializing in a particularly rare or beautiful type of flower. The demand was constant and insatiable. The symbolic meaning of each flower is a complex field of study for historians and anthropologists, and much of it is still being pieced together. We know the marigold was for the dead, but what did a specific variety of dahlia signify? Did gifting someone a tuberose carry a different message than gifting them a salvia? The Spanish friars who documented Aztec culture recorded some of these meanings, but they were often looking through a Christian lens and may have missed the subtle nuances. Some scholars argue that the Aztecs had a complex language of flowers, similar to the one developed in Victorian England, where a carefully chosen bouquet could convey a specific message of love, respect, or even a political statement. Others believe the meanings were more general, tied to specific gods or festivals rather than intricate person-to-person communication. Untangling this symbolic code is an ongoing process. You finish tending to your flower patch. The setting sun catches the green leaves, and you can almost imagine the explosion of color that is to come. You look at your China MPA now and see its true, dual nature. It is a place of profound practicality, a machine for producing sustenance, but it is also a place of beauty, a canvas for creating the transient, fragrant offerings that connect the human world to the divine. You've learned that feeding a people means nourishing both their bodies and their spirits, and your small plot of land is now doing both. The sun has not yet risen. A cool, damp mist hangs over the canals, shrouding the world in a soft, grey silence. The only sound is the gentle lapping of water against the side of your canoe. This is when your day begins. You are falling into the rhythm of a China MPA farmer, a life dictated by the sun, the water, and the needs of your growing plants. You push off from the small dock near your family's simple reed minus plaster hut, which sits on a larger, more established China MPA. The pre-dawn journey to your own plot is a quiet, meditative time. You pull the canoe through the familiar network of waterways, the movements becoming second nature. Other canoes begin to appear out of the mist, lone figures like yourself, heading to their own plots. A soft spoken greeting, a simple nod is exchanged. There's a sense of shared purpose in the quiet morning air. When you arrive at your China MPA, the first task is always observation. You walk the perimeter, your bare feet sensing the texture of the soil. You are a detective looking for clues. You check for any new signs of pests, any wilting leaves, any yellowing that might signal a nutrient deficiency. You inspect the water level in the canal, noting if it's higher or lower than yesterday. This initial inspection sets the agenda for your day. This deep, intuitive connection to the land is a key historical element of traditional farming worldwide, a skill that is felt rather than taught from a book. The morning is for delicate work. The air is cool, and the plants are covered in dew. This is the best time for weeding. As the soil is softened, the unwanted plants pull out easily. It's also the time for hand-picking pests or tending to your fragile flowers. You might spend an hour or two gently guiding the tendrils of your bean vines to ensure they are climbing the maize stalks properly, a task that requires a gentle, patient hand. As the sun climbs higher, the mist burns off, and the day warms up. This is when the more strenuous work begins. If a section of your China palm's edge has started to erode slightly, you'll spend time scooping fresh mud from the canal to patch it up. You might harvest aquatic weeds from the waterway and spread them as fresh mulch around the base of your plants. This is also the time you would do any major planting or transplanting, getting the young plants into the soil before the heat of midday sets in. Legworky, and perhaps unexpected, part of your daily routine involves the local wildlife. You're not just a farmer. You're also a part-time fish and waterfowl manager. You might toss handfuls of algae or certain weeds into the canal to encourage the growth of small, edible fish. You might find yourself in a silent, ongoing battle of wits with a particularly clever heron that has taken a liking to your fish population. And then there are the axolotl tests, these famous, almost mythical looking salamanders with their feathery external gills, are native to these lakes. Seeing one in the clear water of your canal is considered a sign of good luck and a healthy waterway. They are a beloved, almost sacred creature of the China MPI ecosystem. The midday sun is fierce in this high altitude valley. This is a time for rest. You retreat to a small, shaded spot, perhaps under the growing leaves of your pollard dead willow trees. You eat a simple meal, a few warm maize tortillas you brought from home, perhaps with a paste of mashed beans and a sprinkle of salt. You watch the dragonflies dart over the water and listen to the buzz of bees in your squash blossoms. The whole world seems to slow down, to breathe in the heat of the day. In the late afternoon, as the air begins to cool, you undertake the final tasks. This is often the time for watering, gently casting sprays from your gourd onto any plants that look thirsty. It might also be time for a small harvest, not the main event. but just picking a few ripe tomatoes or a handful of chili peppers that are ready for the evening meal. How much of this daily routine was individual choice versus communally mandated? Historians still debate the level of autonomy a Chinampa farmer had. While the land was likely owned or managed by an individual family unit, the Kaopalai, or clan, were there communally organized work parties for larger tasks, like dredging the main canal or building a major new Chinampa. Some sources suggest that certain tasks were performed collectively, especially those that benefited the entire local network. It's likely that a farmer's day was a blend of personal responsibility for their own plot and periodic obligations to the community, a system that balanced individual enterprise with the common good. As the sun begins to touch the tops of the distant volcanoes, your day of labor comes to an end. You load your tools into the canoe, along with any small harvest you've gathered. The journey home is different from the morning's quiet solitude. The canals are busier now, with families returning, their canoes laden with produce. The air is filled with the smells of cooking fires and the sounds of children playing. You have spent your day in the quiet, green world of your making, and now you return to the warm, vibrant world of your community. Your life is governed by the practical rhythms of planting, weeding, and watering, but as you spend more time on your Chinampa, you become aware of another, invisible rhythm that runs parallel to your own. It is the rhythm of the gods. You understand that the fertility of this soil and the life giving water of the canals are not just facts of nature. They are gifts, and gifts require gratitude. Onboarding. Before you begin your work, your guide does something unexpected. He takes a single, perfect tear of maize from a pouch. He holds it for a moment, his lips moving in a silent prayer. Then, he crumbles a few of the dried kernels into his hand, and with a gesture of respect, he buries them in a corner of the Chinampa that is not used for planting. He then takes a bit of pulq, a fermented agave drink, from a small clay bottle and pours a little onto the same spot as a libation. He is feeding the earth, giving a small portion back to the source of his abundance. This is your introduction to the personal, daily rituals of a Chinampa farmer. This isn't about the massive, state-sponsored ceremonies you can see happening at the great temples in Tenochtitlan. This is smaller, more intimate. It's a core historical reality that for the average Aztec, religion wasn't just practiced in a temple. It was woven into the fabric of their everyday existence. Your Chinampa is not just a workspace. It is also your personal altar. You learn that different gods watch over different aspects of your garden. The most important is likely Chinampa, Seven Serpent, the goddess of maize and sustenance. This small offering of corn kernels was for her, a thank you for the staple crop that forms the backbone of your diet. When the rains come, you might whisper a prayer of thanks to Talaka, the powerful goggle-side god of rain and lightning, whose temple-pyramid looms in the city center. You ask him for gentle, life-giving showers, not destructive hailstorms. You might also leave a small, colorful flower for Exochipili, the flower prince, to ensure your floral offerings are beautiful and pleasing. A particularly quirky and interesting belief centers around the tools you use. Your guide treats his aquamately, the mud-scooping pole, with a surprising degree of respect. He never leaves it lying on the ground, but always props it up carefully at the end of the day. He might even tie a small, colorful ribbon to its handle. The belief is that tools, through long use and their essential role in creation, can acquire a small spark of a life force or spirit of their own. To mistreat your tool is to show disrespect to the work itself and to the spirit that helps you perform it. It's a form of animism that extends even to the mundane objects of your daily labor. You begin to incorporate these small rituals into your own routine. Before you plant a new set of seedlings, you might offer a pinch of copal incense, its fragrant smoke carrying your prayers upwards. When you see a particularly vibrant squash blossom, you might touch it gently and thank the earth for its generosity. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet moments of connection, a constant conversation with the forces you believe govern your world. They are a way of acknowledging that your success is not just due to your own hard work, but also to the benevolence of the unseen world. Of course, the line between these small, Personal folk rituals and the official state religion is a subject of ongoing discussion among historians and archaeologists. The Aztec priesthood, with its complex cosmology and rigid ceremonial calendar, certainly dictated the major religious events of the year. But how much control did they have over these everyday, personal expressions of faith? Some scholars argue that there was a significant gap between the official, often intimidating state religion and the more practical, nature-based folk beliefs of the common farmer. Others suggest they were two sides of the same coin, with the grand state rituals providing the framework and the personal rituals filling in the daily details. It's a debate about the difference between prescribed religion and lived religion, and for the Aztecs, the two were likely deeply intertwined. You stand on your China MPA as the sun begins to set. You have weeded and watered and tended to your plants, but you have also made your offerings. You fed the earth, thanked the rain, and honored your tools. You are not just a farmer managing a plot of land. You are a caretaker, in a reciprocal relationship with the soil, the water, and the divine. You give it your labor and your respect, and in return, it gives you life. This understanding changes the way you see your work. It is no longer just a job. It is a sacred duty. Your China MPA is a miracle of productivity. The first cycle of crops is maturing beautifully, and you're already starting the next generation of seedlings in your nursery. But a thought occurs to you, a simple, logical question: if you keep taking vegetables, flowers, and nutrients out of the soil, won't it eventually get tired? Won't it run out of fuel? Farmers all over the world struggle with soil exhaustion, having to leave fields fallow to let them recover. How do the Chinampas keep producing, year after year, decade after decade, with up to 7 harvests a year? The answer is that a China MPA is not a static bed of soil. It is a living, breathing system that is constantly being replenished. You don't just take from it, you actively feed it. You are about to learn the Aztec secrets to creating soil that seemingly never dies. This is a crucial piece of the historical puzzle. The Aztecs were not just expert builders and planters. They were masters of soil regeneration. Your guide demonstrates the most fundamental technique. He pulls his canoe into the canal right next to your China MPA. The surface of the water is covered in a thick, green carpet of aquatic plants like duckweed and water hyacinth. Using a special wooden rake, he gathers a large mass of this floating greenery and, with a heave, deposits it directly onto the surface of your China MPA, right at the base of your maize plants. He does the same with a scoop of the dark, rich mud from the bottom of the canal. This is the primary method of fertilization. You are literally adding a new layer of highly fertile organic matter to the top of your garden. The aquatic weeds are rich in nitrogen and other minerals they've absorbed from the water. As they decompose, they release these nutrients directly into the root zone of your plants. The fresh layer of mud from the canal floor, the same stuff used to build the China MPA in the first place, is packed with decomposed organic material and beneficial microbes. You are essentially composting in place, constantly adding new life to the soil. But the techniques get more specific than that. Here's a wonderfully clever and slightly pungent trick. You create a dedicated compost pile right on a corner of your China MPA. Into this pile goes everything. You toss in the weeds you pull from between your crops, any damaged or inedible parts of your harvested vegetables like corn husks or tough squash vines, and leftover food scraps from your household. You also add the ash from your cooking fire, which is rich in potassium and helps to sweeten the soil. And, yes, you add the carefully collected and aged human and animal manure. This creates a potent, slow-release fertilizer that you can then spread on the China MPA as needed. This systematic use of night soil human manure is a well-documented, but often glossed-over aspect of Aztec society. As mentioned before, they had an organized system for collecting it from the city and transporting it to the Chinampas. This solved two problems at once. It kept the city of Tenochtitlan remarkably clean for its size, preventing the spread of diseases that plagued European cities of the same era, and it provided a constant, powerful source of fertilizer for the farms. is a perfect example of the Aztecs' pragmatic and cyclical view of the world, where nothing is truly waste. The scientific basis for this constant replenishment is a hot topic for modern soil scientists who study the China MPA system. The debate isn't about if it worked clearly. It did, but how it worked so perfectly. Some researchers focus on the chemical composition, analyzing the precise balance of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus that the Aztecs were able to maintain. Others focus on the biological aspect, arguing that the true secret was the incredibly rich and diverse microbiome. By constantly adding fresh mud and varied organic matter, the China MPA farmers were fostering a thriving underground ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, worms, and other organisms that were doing the hard work of breaking down materials and feeding the plants. The question is, did the Aztecs have an explicit understanding of this? Or was it a form of ecological instinct honed over centuries of trial and error? We can't know for sure, but their results speak for themselves. You begin to practice these techniques. You learn to read the soil's needs. If the leaves of your beans are looking a little pale, you know it's time to add a fresh layer of nitrogen minus rich water wheat. If the squash production seems to be slowing down, you might add a scoop of your nutrient minus dense compost around the base of the plants. You are no longer just a planter. You are a soil chef, constantly adjusting the recipe to keep your garden happy and productive. This new understanding is a revelation. The China MPA isn't a finite resource you are slowly depleting. It's a dynamic entity that you are creating with the lake. With each layer of mud and mulch you add, the China MPA actually grows, rising slowly higher over the decades. You aren't just farming on this land. You are actively building it, layer by layer, season by season. The soil is not just a medium for your plants. It is a legacy you are creating. You have been so focused on your own plot of land, your soil, your plants, your water levels that you've barely paid attention to the world just beyond its edges. But as you become more comfortable with your daily routine, you start to look up and around. You realize your China MPA doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is one small square in a vast, living quilt of gardens, and the threads that stitch it all together are the canals. You begin to see the canals not just as a source of water and mud, or as a moat to keep pests away, but as the streets and avenues of your neighborhood. Your guide's family lives on a large China MPA a few canals over. Your nearest neighbor, an elderly woman who specializes in growing medicinal herbs, is just a short paddle away. You are part of a community on the water, a unique social fabric that is entirely shaped by this aquatic environment. The main mode of interaction is the canoe. In the morning, you join a quiet, pre-dawn traffic jam of farmers heading out to their plots. In the evening, you paddle home amidst a flotilla of others, the sounds of conversation and laughter echoing across the water. News travels by canoe. A man paddling by might shout a greeting and share a piece of local gossip, or a warning about a particular pest that's been spotted in the area. There are no fences between your properties, only the shimmering water of the canal. This fosters a sense of openness and interdependence. Your neighbor's good fortune is, in a way, your own, as it signals the health of the entire system. This is a key historical understanding of China MPA society. The physical layout of the agricultural zone created a unique social structure. Unlike land-based farming communities where homes might be clustered in a village far from the fields, here, your home, your work, and your community are all integrated. This aquatic life shaped their social interactions, their economy, and even their identity. You also learn that the canals are a place of commerce, a sort of floating marketplace. One day, a man in a canoe laden with sharp, black obsidian tools paddles up to your China MPA. He is a traveling merchant. He has blades for cutting, needles for sewing, and razors for shaving. You don't have money to pay him. Instead, you trade. He eyes your healthy minus-looking tomato plants, and you negotiate a dealer basket of your first ripe tomatoes in exchange for a new razor minus sharp obsidian knife. Bartering is the lifeblood of the local economy. A few days later, A woman might paddle by with intricately woven textiles, and you might trade a bundle of your fragrant flowers for a new cloak. Here's a curious and charming aspect of this canal life. You develop a whole new set of skills. You learn how to have a conversation with someone while both of you are constantly making small adjustments with your poles to keep your canoes from drifting apart. You learn how to hand a heavy basket of squash from your unstable canoe to your neighbors without dropping it in the water. You even learn to recognize people from a distance, not by their face, but by the distinctive way they pole their canoe or the specific design of their boat. The canals are also a playground. Children, having finished their chores, swim in the clean, fresh water. They have races in tiny, child-sized canoes. They hunt for frogs and catch fish with small nets. The water is not a hazard to be feared. It is their backyard. But how is this intricate water-minus world managed? This is a source of ongoing academic debate. We know that the major dikes and causeways were massive state-run projects. But who was responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of this local network? Was there a canal master for each neighborhood, responsible for organizing the dredging and keeping the waterways clear? Or was it a more informal, communal effort, where families were simply expected to maintain the section of canal bordering their own Chinampa? Evidence can be found to support both theories. The highly organized nature of Aztec society points to some level of official oversight, but the sheer scale of the network suggests that a great deal of the work must have been done at the local, community level. It was likely another hybrid system, a partnership between the state and the people. You pause your work and watch as a family paddles by in a larger canoe. The father poles at the back. The mother is weaving a basket in the middle, and two small children are trailing their hands in the water at the front. They smile and call out a greeting to you. In that moment, you feel a profound sense of belonging. You are not an isolated farmer on a lonely plot. You are a member of the floating neighborhood, a citizen of the canals. Your world is defined by the water, and it is the water that connects you to everyone else. Several years have passed. Your Chinampa is no longer a new, raw creation. It is a mature, established garden, a thrumming engine of life. The 4 willow trees you planted at the corners are no longer saplings. They are strong, thick-trunked trees whose pollard dead branches provide you with a steady supply of firewood and weaving material. Their powerful roots have anchored your island firmly to the lake bed, and you can feel the solidity of the ground beneath your feet. You have pulled hundreds of harvests from this soil, and you have fed it countless layers of fresh mud and mulch. Your plot has physically grown, its surface now noticeably higher than when you first built it. You are no longer a novice, but an experienced Chinampa. You can read the health of your garden in the subtle curl of a leaf, the buzz of the insects, the smell of the soil after a light rain. Your movements are efficient and sure, but a mature garden requires a different kind of care than a new one. It now requires long-term maintenance. Your focus shifts from creation to stewardship. One of the most important tasks is maintaining the edges. Over time, the constant lapping of water from the canal, the wake from passing canoes, and the occasional heavy rain can cause the sides of the Chinampa to erode. The woven wattle fence you built years ago has long since decomposed, becoming part of the soil. The primary defense against erosion now are the dense root systems of your plants and the willow trees, but even they need help. This is a crucial historical point. A Chinampa was not a build minus, it project. It required continuous, multi-generational upkeep. You spend a significant amount of your time reinforcing the borders. This involves dredging fresh, thick mud and plastering it onto the sides, rebuilding any areas that have slumped or washed away. You might also dart new stakes into the edges and weave fresh branches between them, creating a new retaining wall. It's a bit like being a mason, but your mortar is mud and your bricks are woven reeds. Another key maintenance task is managing the soil height. After years of adding layer upon layer of mulch and mud, the surface of your Chinampa has risen. While this is a good thing, it can change the hydrology. The surface is now further away from the water table in the canal, which means the capillary action might not be as effective in keeping the topsoil moist. you'll have to be more vigilant with your watering, and you might need to apply thicker layers of mulch to prevent evaporation. Here's a quirky problem that comes with a mature China MPA tree management. Your beautiful willow trees are essential, but you can't let them grow and shed. If their canopy becomes too large, they will cast too much shade on your sun-loving crops like maize and tomatoes. So the regular pollarding, the strategic pruning of the upper branches, is not just for harvesting wood. It's a vital horticultural task to manage the amount of sunlight that reaches your garden. You are, in a sense, a sculptor of trees, shaping their growth to meet the needs of the plants below. You also have to manage the long-term health of the soil. While your constant additions of organic matter keep it fertile, you learn that it's wise to rotate where you plant certain heavy-feeding crops. You might have planted your maize in the northern half of the China MPA for several years. Now, you'll switch it to the southern half, and in its old spot, you'll plant nitrogen-fixing beans to help rejuvenate that specific patch of soil. This is a sophisticated understanding of crop rotation, designed for a hyper-intensive system. The question of how long a China MPA could last is a subject of academic fascination. With proper maintenance, could one last forever? In theory, yes, as long as the canals were dredged and the edges reinforced. A China MPA could be maintained indefinitely. Archaeologists have studied the remnants of China palms that are centuries old, and the core structures are still visible. However, they were vulnerable to catastrophic events. A massive flood could breach the main dikes, inundating the fields with saline water and killing the crops. A prolonged drought could lower the lake level so much that the canals would dry up, severing the China palms from their lifeblood. The debate among historians is how often these catastrophic failures occurred. Was the system generally stable and resilient, or was it a high-wire act, constantly at risk of collapse? The evidence of its long-term success suggests resilience. That the historical record also contains accounts of famines caused by flood or drought, reminding us that even this ingenious system was ultimately at the mercy of Mother Nature. You stand on your China MPA, this plot that has been your life's work. You look at the solid earth, the strong trees, the vibrant tapestry of plants. It is a legacy. You are not just its owner. You are its current caretaker. You are part of a long chain. You inherited the knowledge from the generation before you, and you will pass on both the knowledge and the land itself to the generation that comes after. The work is never truly done, and that is its beauty. The China MPA is a living monument to the partnership between humans and their environment, a partnership that requires constant attention, respect, and care. The day has a different energy. There's a buzz in the air, a sense of anticipation. You've been watching your main maize crop for weeks, seeing the ears swollen, the silky tassels turn from pale yellow to a deep, dry brown. Your squash plants are heavy with fruit, and the tomato vines are laden with ripe, red globes. The small, daily harvests for your family's meals are one thing, but this is different. This is the great harvest, the culmination of a full season's work, a bounty that will be taken to the city and traded. The harvest is not a frantic, rushed affair. It's a methodical, almost ceremonial process. You begin with the maize, the sacred crop. You walk down the rows, and with a practiced twist, you snap the mature ears from the stalk. You don't just rip them off. You handle each one with a sense of gratitude. This plant is the physical manifestation of the goddess Chinampa, the sustainer of life. To treat it roughly would be an act of disrespect. This deep reverence for the harvest is a key feature of Aztec agricultural life, a historical fact confirmed by numerous chronicles. Farming was an economic activity, but the harvest was a religious one. You placed the ears of corn carefully into large, woven baskets. Some will be kept for your family, to be dried and ground into flour for tortillas. But the most perfect, unblemished ears are set aside. These are your market crops, your currency. Next, you move to the squash. You use your new obsidian knife, the one you traded for, to cleanly cut the thick stems, leaving a small handle on each fruit. You choose the ones that are firm, colorful, and free from any soft spots. Then come the tomatoes. the chili peppers, the beans which have been left to dry on the vine. Each crop has its own method, its own rhythm of collection. Here's a quirky and charming detail of the harvest: you always leave a little behind. You won't pick every last bean or the smallest, misshapen squash. These are left in the field as an offering. Part of it is a gift back to the earth, a thank you for its generosity. But it's also for the wild creatures. You are acknowledging that you are part of an ecosystem, and you have an obligation to share a small part of your bounty with the other inhabitants. It's also for any hungry traveler or neighbor who might pass by. It's a form of community welfare, an unspoken rule that no one should go entirely without. The harvest is often a family affair. Your partner, your children, even your elderly parents might join you on the China MPA for this important event. The work is shared, punctuated by conversation and song. The children might be tasked with a simple job, like gathering the dried bean pods, learning the rhythms of the harvest from a young age. It's a moment of collective effort and shared satisfaction. As you gather your bounty, you are essentially grading your own work. The size and quality of your maize ears tell you if your soil replenishment strategy was successful. The sweetness of your tomatoes tells you if your watering was consistent. The harvest is your report card for the season. The sheer productivity of this system is a topic that continues to amaze and spark debate among historians and agronomists. How much food could one China MPA plot actually produce in a year? Estimates vary widely, and it's a difficult question to answer definitively. Some scholars, using calculations based on the caloric needs of the population and the estimated number of China pounds, propose astonishingly high yields, suggesting the system was more productive per square foot than almost any form of pre-industrial agriculture on Earth. Others are more conservative, arguing that, while highly productive, the China pounds were just one part of a more complex food system that also included tribute from conquered territories and hunting and fishing. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, but there is no debate that the China MPA system was the core engine that powered the Aztec capital. By the end of the day, your China MPA looks transformed. It is sparser, lighter. The heavy weight of the mature crops has been lifted. But your canoe is now the opposite. It is laden with the vibrant colors of your labor, the gold of the maize, the deep green of the squash, the brilliant red of the tomatoes and chilies, and the bright, cheerful hues of the flower bouquets you've gathered. The boat sits low in the water, a vessel overflowing with life and wealth. You look at the massive pile of food and flowers. It is a tangible result of months of effort of building, planting, weeding, watering, and watching. It is the payoff for the pre-dawn mornings and the long, sunny afternoons. Tomorrow, you will embark on a different kind of journey. You will leave the quiet, green world of the canals and paddle into the heart of the empire. Tomorrow, you go to the market. The morning of the market day starts even earlier than usual, and the deep, pre-dawn darkness. You load your canoe with the bounty of your harvest. This requires careful planning. The heavier items, like the squash and maize, go on the bottom to keep the canoe stable. The more delicate goods, the baskets of ripe tomatoes and the carefully arranged bouquets of flowers, are placed on top, cushioned with soft leaves to prevent bruising. Your canoe, your humble écolier, is transformed into a floating market stall, a vibrant pyramid of color and life. You push off into the main canal. You are not alone. A great, silent procession of canoes is already underway, emerging from the smaller waterways and joining the main route that leads towards the city. It's a traffic jam of farmers. Some canoes, like yours, are piled high with produce. Others might be carrying pottery, textiles, or live turkeys gobbling nervously in wicker cages. This journey to the market is a communal event, a vital part of the economic and social life of the China MPA zone. This mass movement of goods on the water is a well-documented historical reality, the logistical backbone of the Aztec economy. The journey is long. It might take several hours to paddle from the southern agricultural zones to the great market in the northern part of the city. As you travel, the landscape changes. You leave the relatively quiet, Rural canals behind and enter the major aquatic arteries of the empire. The waterways become wider, deeper, and more crowded. You pass under small wooden bridges and alongside the massive stone causeways that connect the island city to the mainland. You see canoes of every shape and size. There are large, heavy transport canoes carrying building materials like stone and lumber. There are sleek, official miners-looking canoes carrying priests or government officials, recognizable by their painted insignia. And there are the Poktake, the professional long-distance merchants, whose canoes are filled with exotic goods from the far reaches of the empire, brightly colored parrot feathers from the tropics, jaguar pelts, and precious cacao beans that are used as a form of currency. Here's a curious and practical detail of this journey canoe etiquette. There are unwritten rules of the road, or rather, the water. Slower, heavier canoes like yours are expected to keep to the sides, leaving the center channel clear for faster traffic. You learn to anticipate the wake from larger boats and how to position your own canoe to avoid being rocked too much. There are even specific calls and shouts used to signal your intention to turn or to pass another vessel. It's a complex, fluid dance of navigation that everyone seems to understand instinctively. As you get closer to the city, the air changes. You can smell the smoke from thousands of cooking fires and the scent of incense from the temples. The low hum you once heard from a distance becomes a roar, the sound of a massive, bustling metropolis. The sheer scale of Tenochtitlan is ominous inspiring. You paddle through the city as Chinampa suburbs, which are different from your own. These are often the homes of the wealthy, with larger houses made of stone and plaster, and gardens that are more for pleasure than for production. Your destination is not just any market. You are heading to the single greatest center of commerce in the Americas, the great market Tlatelolco. Tlatelolco was once a separate city-minor state, but it was conquered and absorbed by its powerful neighbor, Tenochtitlan. However, its marketplace remained the dominant one for the entire region. The question of why the Tlatelolco market remained the primary one, even after the city was subjugated by Tenochtitlan, is a fascinating topic for historians. Why didn't the victorious Aztecs simply establish a new, grander market in their own city center? One theory is that the Tlatelolco market was simply too big, too established, and too efficient to be replaced. Its location was ideal, with easy access to the main canals and causeways. Another theory suggests it was a savvy political move by the Aztec rulers. By allowing Tlatelolco to keep its economic heart, they could tax the immense wealth that flowed through it, turning a former rival into a lucrative cash cow. This debate highlights the complex mixture of military, political, and economic calculations that shaped the Aztec Empire. You enter a vast, wide canal that functions as a boat harbor for the market. The water is choked with thousands of canoes. The noise is almost overwhelming. People are shouting, bargaining, laughing. The smell is a dizzying mix of fresh produce, grilled meat, pungent spices, and the sweat of thousands of people. You have arrived at the doorstep of the empire's stomach. Now, you just have to find a place to park. You begin the slow, difficult process of navigating through the dense traffic, looking for an open spot along the water's edge to unload your precious cargo. The real work is about to begin. You finally manage to nudge your canoe into a space along the crowded stone embankment that borders the market. The moment you step out of your boat and onto the solid ground of the great plaza of Tlatelolco, your senses are completely overwhelmed. This is not just a market, it's a living, breathing city within a city. The Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz del Castillo, one of the first Europeans to see it, would later write that he had never seen a market so large, so well organized, and so full of people. He and his comrades, who had seen the great markets of Rome and Constantinople, were utterly astounded. This is the mainstream historical consensus. Tlatelolco was one of the world's great commercial centers. The plaza itself is vast, a wide open space paved with smooth flagstones, large enough to hold tens of thousands of people. And today, it feels like all of them are here. The roar of the crowd is a physical presence, a wall of sound made up of countless individual negotiations, greetings, and argument. You see people from every corner of the Aztec Empire and beyond. There are local farmers like yourself, nobles adorned in cotton and feathers, fierce miners-looking warriors with their distinctive hairstyles, and merchants from distant lands whose different clothing and dialects mark them as outsiders. You carry your baskets of produce from your canoe to your designated spot. The market is not a chaotic free minus for minus all. It is meticulously organized. There are specific aisles and sections for each type of good. You find the area for fresh vegetables and flowers and lay out your wares on a woven reed mat. Around you are other China, MPA farmers. Their mats a kaleidoscope of greens, reds, and yellows. In the next aisle over is the fruit section, piled high with tropical fruits you don't recognize. Further down, you can see the butcher's section, with vendors selling everything from turkeys and dogs to deer and wild birds. The sheer variety of goods is mind-boggling. There's a section for pottery, with everything from simple cooking pots to exquisitely painted ceremonial vessels. There's an area for textiles, with brilliant bolts of dyed cotton cloth. You see vendors selling tools, obsidian blades, stone axes, copper needles. There are sellers of salt, honey, and vanilla. There's even a section that's essentially a fast minus food court, where women are cooking fresh tortillas on clay griddles and serving up hot bowls of stew to hungry shoppers. A particularly strange and specific section of the market is the one selling building materials. You can see vendors with neat stacks of adobe bricks, bundles of reeds for thatching roofs, and even piles of lime, which was used to make plaster and to treat maize in a process called nixtamalization. You could, in theory, buy everything you need to build a house and furnish it right here in the market. As you arrange your tomatoes and maize, you notice figures walking through the crowds. They are not buying or selling. They are market judges, appointed by the city's commercial authorities. Their job is to patrol the market, ensuring fair trade, checking the quality of goods, and settling disputes on the spot. If someone is caught cheating with their weights or selling substandard produce, they are taken to a small courthouse located right at the edge of the market for immediate judgment. This level of regulation in consumer protection was highly advanced for its time. But what did they use for money? This is a question that historians and economists still love to debate. The Aztec economy did not use coinage in the way the Old World did. It was a complex system that blended barter with the use of several standardized forms of currency. For small, everyday purchases, the most common form of currency was the cacao bean. Your basket of tomatoes might be worth, say, 20 cacao beans. For larger purchases, standardized lengths of cotton cloth, gold quartz TLI, were used. Precious goods like gold dust kept in transparent quills, copper X minus heads, and even valuable feathers also served as mediums of exchange for high minus value transactions. So it was purely a barter economy, but a sophisticated multi-minus currency system that required merchants to be constantly calculating exchange rates between different commodities. You settle in behind your mat, the roar of the market washing over you. A potential customer, a woman from the city, stops to inspect your flowers. She picks up a bouquet of your marigolds, admiring their perfect, vibrant blossoms. The moment of truth has arrived. All your hard work building the land, nurturing the seeds, protecting the plants, and paddling for hours, it has all come down to this single interaction. This negotiation on a woven mat in the heart of the world's most incredible market. The woman examining your marigolds is clearly a city dweller, her clothes finer than yours, her hands uncalloused. She asks the price. You don't state a number. Instead, you begin the subtle dance of negotiation. You might suggest what you're looking for in return. They are worth a good measure of salt. You might say, knowing that salt, harvested from the saltier parts of the lake or brought in as tribute, is a valuable commodity that you can't produce on your freshwater China MPA. She scoffs theatrically, but with a smile. For a few flowers, you must think I am a noble woman. She counters with a lower offer, perhaps a small handful of cacao beans. And so it begins. This process of bartering is the engine of the marketplace. It's a skill in itself. a blend of knowing the true value of your goods, reading the intentions of your customer, and having the patience to haggle. This is a central, well-minus, documented aspect of the Taltaleco market. Commerce was a conversation, not a fixed minus price transaction. You go back and forth. You point out the quality of your flowers, the vibrancy of their color, the fact that they are fresh from this morning. She might point out a tiny, almost invisible imperfection on one of the petals. Eventually, you settle on a price you can both live with. She gets the marigold, and you get a small bag of precious salt and a few cacao beans for your trouble. You've made your first sale. The day continues like this. A cook from a wealthy household buys a large portion of your squash and maize, trading you for a bolt of plain cotton cloth that you can use to make new clothes for your family. A priest's attendant, preparing for a ceremony, buys your entire stock of tomatoes, paying you in a small handful of the coveted cacao beans. You quickly learn that different buyers have different needs and different things to trade. You have to be flexible, constantly calculating the relative worth of things. Is a basket of chilies worth a good clay pot? Are 2 bouquets of dahlias a fair trade for a pair of sturdy sandals? One of the most unusual forms of currency you might encounter is the tarjade roll, a small, T-shaped piece of copper. These were produced in standard weights and sizes and were used for mid-minus level transactions, more valuable than cacao, but less so than cotton cloth. It's a strange, almost artistic minus-looking object that functions like a coin, but without a face or a number stamped on it. Its value was inherent in its material and standardized form. The value of your produce fluctuates based on season and availability. In the drier season, when fresh vegetables are scarcer, the price you can command is higher. Right now, at the peak of the harvest, the market is flooded with produce, so competition is fierce, and the prices are lower. You are not just a farmer, you are an entrepreneur, keenly aware of market dynamics. But what if a deal goes wrong? This is where the market judges come in, and it's a topic that continues to fascinate legal historians. The chronicles of the Spanish, particularly those of Hernan Cortés and Bernal Diaz, describe a formal court within the market, with judges who could hand down swift sentences. But how did this system really work? Was it a formal legal proceeding with evidence and testimony, or was it more of a mediation service, where respected elders would help two parties find a fair compromise? Some scholars argue the Spanish may have exaggerated the formality of the court to make it seem more recognizable to a European audience. Others maintain that for a market of this scale to function, a rapid and decisive judicial system was an absolute necessity. The exact nature of market justice at Taltaleco remains a tantalizingly blurry picture. By late afternoon, your mat is nearly empty. You have successfully traded most of your harvest. Your canoe is no longer filled with vegetables and flowers, but with a collection of new, essential goods. You have the salt you needed, the cloth for new garments, a new cooking pot, a sharp copper needle, and, most importantly, a pouch full of cacao beans. These beans are your cash. You can use them on your way home to buy a hot tortilla, or you can save them, as they store well and are accepted as payment everywhere. You pack up your empty baskets and your woven mat. The crowd in the market is beginning to thin as people head home for the evening meal. The roar has subsided to a dull hum. You are exhausted, your voice hoarse from a day of haggling, but you feel a deep sense of accomplishment. You came to the heart of the empire with the fruits of your labor, and you are leaving with the necessities of your life. You have transformed the bounty of your small island of mud into wealth you can carry. The journey home is a mere image of the morning's procession, but the mood is entirely different. The canoes are lighter, sitting higher in the water, and the paddlers are weary but satisfied. The intense energy of the market gives way to the calm, cool air of the evening. The setting sun paints the sky in hues of orange and purple, reflecting off the smooth surface of the canals. The great volcanoes on the horizon stand as dark silhouettes against the fading light. You pull your canoe with a steady, practiced rhythm, your new possessions stowed safely at your feet, the bag of salt, the bolt of cloth, The pouch of cacao beans, they are tangible proof of your success. This is the crucial final link in the economic chain of the China MPA. You don't just grow food to eat, you grow food to trade for the things you cannot produce yourself. This system allowed for a remarkable degree of specialization. You could focus on being the best farmer possible, secure in the knowledge that someone else was focusing on being the best potter, weaver, or toolmaker. The market was the place where all these specialized skills came together for the benefit of all. As you navigate the familiar waterways back to your own neighborhood, the sounds of the city fade behind you, replaced by the gentle chirping of crickets and the croaking of frogs. You feel the tension of the day release from your shoulders. The market is a world of noise, competition, and constant calculation. The China MPA's own is a world of quiet, cooperation, and patient observation. You are a citizen of both, fluent in their different languages, comfortable in their different rhythms. You arrive back at your home China MPA as twilight settles. Your family greets you, eager to see the results of your day at market. You unload your new goods, each item a small victory. The salt will make your food taste better for weeks to come. The cloth will become a new tunic for your son. The cacao beans are a form of savings, a small store of wealth for a future need. But the work is not over. The very next morning, you are back out on your China MPA. The harvest has left it looking bare and tired. It's time to begin the cycle anew. This relentless, cyclical nature of the work is a fundamental historical truth of China MPA farming. There was no long off-minus season. The land was too valuable, and the demand for food from the city was too great. You begin by clearing the remnants of the previous crop. You pull up the old maize stalks and squash vines, but you don't discard them. They go directly onto your compost pile, where they will break down and eventually return their nutrients to the very soil that grew them. This is the first step in repaying the debt to the earth. Next, you spend a day or two feeding the China MPA. You dredge fresh mud from the canal and spread it over the harvested sections. You gather aquatic weeds and lay them down as a nourishing mold. You might take some of the mature compost from your pile and work it into the soil. You are preparing the bed, making it rich and ready for the next generation of plants. A quirky but important task you might perform at this stage is a kind of deep cleaning of the soil. Using a simple wooden spade, you turn over the top layer of earth, exposing it to the sun and air. This helps to disrupt the life cycle of any pests that might be living in the soil and aerates the bed, improving its structure. It's like hitting a reset button on your garden. The debate among agronomists and historians here is on the topic of nutrient loss. Even with this incredible recycling system, was there a net loss of certain micronutrients over time? Did the constant addition of the same lake mud and local plants lead to an imbalance? Some theories suggest that the Aztec supplemented their soil with minerals brought in as tribute from other regions, perhaps specific types of mineral minus, rich soil or ash from volcanic areas. Others argue that the biological diversity of the system was so robust that the microbiome was able to unlock and recycle nutrients with astonishing efficiency, making external additions unnecessary. This question gets to the heart of the long-minus term sustainability of the system and is still being explored through soil analysis of archaeological sites. Finally, with the soil clear, fed, and prepared, you make a trip to your nursery. A new batch of seedlings, perhaps hardier beans and chilies for the coming cooler season, is waiting, their leaves green and healthy, their roots filling their mud cubes. You carry them back to the China MPA, to the same rows where the maize stood just a few days ago. With the same care and hope as before, you press the small cubes of life into the dirt, wet, rejuvenated earth. The cycle begins again. The king is dead. Long live the king. You stand on your China MPA, looking at the neat rows of new seedlings you've just planted. They look so small and fragile in the vast expanse of black earth. It strikes you that you have performed this exact task dozens of times. You have built this land, planted it, harvested it, and replenished it over and over again. It's a cycle of labor that seems endless. But as you get older, your perspective begins to change. You start to see that your work is not just for one season, or even for your own lifetime. You are creating a legacy made of mud. Your children, who once just played at the edges of the canal, are now old enough to help you with the real work. Your son is learning how to pull the canoe with a steady hand. His movement's still a bit clumsy but getting stronger every day. Your daughter has a keen eye for spotting pests and a gentle touch for tending to the delicate flowers. You are teaching them everything you know, not by sitting them down for lessons, but by working alongside them. Just as your guide once worked alongside you. You teach them how to read the water, to feel the soil, to listen to the language of the plants. You pass on the practical knowledge, the best way to anchor a state, the right consistency for the nursery mud, the subtle art of haggling at the mark. This transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next is the invisible foundation upon which the entire Chinampa system rests. It's a historical truth that this complex agricultural science was not written down in books. It was embodied in the minds and muscles of the farmers themselves. You also pass on the stories and the rituals. You show your children how to leave a small offering for Chinampa, the maize goddess, and to treat the tools with respect. You tell them the story of the three sisters, so they understand not just how to plant the crops together, but why. This ensures that the cultural and spiritual significance of the work is not lost. They are learning that farming is not just a way to get food, but a way to live in balance with the world. A curious and poignant part of this legacy is the connection to the land itself. Your Chinampa is not just a place of work. It is becoming a family record. You can point to one of the great willow trees at the corner and say, "My father helped me plant that tree when I was a young man." The layers of soil beneath your feet are a physical history of your family's labor, a mixture of the mud you dredged in the compost made from the scraps of your family's meals. The land is part of you, and you are part of it. This concept of land tenure and inheritance in the Aztec world is complex and still debated by historians. It doesn't seem to have been private property in the modern, Western sense. An individual family didn't own their Chinampa in a way that would let them sell it to a stranger. The land technically belonged to the Kaupolai, the local clan or community group. My family had the right to use the land, to live on it, and to pass that right down to their children, as long as they continued to work it and pay their share of tribute to the state. If a family died out or abandoned their plot, the usage rights would revert to the Kaupolai to be reassigned to another family. This system ensured that this precious agricultural land was always kept in production. It was a system that prioritized the community's needs over individual ownership, a concept of stewardship rather than possession. One day, you and your son are working together to reinforce a section of the Chinampa's edge. As you scoop the heavy, wet mud from the canal, you realize you are performing the exact same motion you learned as a novice so many years ago. But now, your movements are sure and economical, and you are the one explaining the technique to the next generation. In that moment, the cycle becomes clear. You are a temporary caretaker, a link in a chain that stretches back into the past and you how far into the future. You look at your son's hands, caked in the same black mud as your own. You see that you are not just building a farm, you are building an inheritance. It's not an inheritance of gold or jewels, but of something far more valuable, a piece of living, breathing, productive earth. You are giving your children a home, a livelihood, a connection to their ancestors, and a place in the world. This small island, born from the water through your own sweat and ingenuity, is the most enduring thing you will ever create. It will continue to feed your family long after you are gone. A quiet, fertile monument to a life well lived. Time flows on, measured in harvests and the slow rising of the soil. You have become an elder now. Your face is wrinkled as the sun minus dried chili peppers you hang from your hut. Your children now have children of their own, and it is your grandchildren who now play in the canals, their laughter echoing across the water. Your Chinampa, your life's work, is a mature and stable island, a permanent feature in this aquatic landscape. You've become an ancestor in your own lifetime, a living repository of the knowledge that sustains your community. But then, a strange new current disturbs the waters. From the east, news arrives. carried by travelers and merchants, of men who have arrived on the coast. They came in massive canoes with white sails like clouds. They have skin as pale as maize flour and hair on their faces like dried corn silk. They ride on strange, hornless deer and carry weapons that make a sound like Talaka's thunder, spitting fire and death. At first, these are just stories, distant and strange, like tales from the mythical land of Aztec. But the stories get closer. The strangers are moving inland, forming alliances with tribes who resent the power of Tenochtitlan. The world, which for so long felt so stable and predictable, now feels uncertain. This arrival of the Spanish under Hernan Cortés in 1519 is, of course, the pivotal, cataclysmic event in Aztec history. For the people living it, it was a slow minus dawning, terrifying mystery. You see the effects not in a great battle at first, but in the subtle disruptions to your rhythm. The traffic on the canals changes. You see more canoes carrying warriors and supplies. The mood at the Tlatelolco market grows tense. The prices of goods fluctuate wildly based on rumors and fear. Then comes the sea. The great causeways are cut. The flow of goods into the city, the lifeblood you have always been a part of, is severed. From your China MPA, you can see the smoke rising from the city. You can hear the thunder of the Spanish cannons and the terrifying, alien sound of their war horses. The world has been turned upside minus down. The final, brutal siege of Tenochtitlan was devastating. But an even deadlier, invisible enemy came with the invader's disease. Smallpox, a disease to which the indigenous people had no immunity, swept through the population, killing far more people than any weapon. Here is a final, tragic, and cold piece of historical fact. The China MPA system, this miracle of agricultural engineering, could not save the city. It could produce food, but it could not defend against steel, gunpowder, and germs. The fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521 was the end of an empire and the end of a world. But it was not the end of the China pounds. After the conquest, the Spanish built a new city, Mexico City, directly on the ruins of Tenochtitlan. They marveled at the China palms, this ingenious system of floating gardens, while they drained large parts of the lake to make more dry land for their European-style city. They did not, and could not, completely destroy the agricultural heart of the region. The China palms were simply too productive. For centuries, they continued to be the primary source of fresh vegetables for the sprawling new colonial capital. The question of how much the China MPA technique changed after the conquest is a fascinating area of study. Did the Spanish introduce new tools, new crops, or new methods? Yes, they introduced iron tools, which made some tasks easier, and they brought crops like onions, lettuce, and cilantro, which were quickly incorporated into the system. But did they fundamentally alter the Aztec design? The consensus among historians is a resounding no. The core techniques, the creation of the land from mud, the use of canal water for hydration, the constant replenishment of the soil were so perfectly adapted to the local environment that the Spanish had little to improve upon. The system was a masterpiece of indigenous science that simply absorbed a few new elements. And so, you fade from the story. Your personal journey ends, landing into the great, tumultuous river of history. But your creation, your legacy made of mud, endures, even today, in the southern borough of Saquismola in modern-day Mexico City. A small remnant of this vast agricultural system survived. You can still see the long, rectangular islands, separated by canals. You can still see farmers tending their plots, loading their produce on two colorful boats called T-Ragineras. These are the direct descendants of the world you knew. They are a living museum, a testament to the ingenuity of your ancestors. Scientists, agronomists, and historians from all over the world now come to study these remaining China pounds, hoping to learn their secrets of sustainable agriculture and water management. The knowledge you embodied is now being recognized as a potential solution for a future struggling with food security and environmental change. Your small, quiet life as a farmer, it turns out, was part of something monumental. Your daily labor, The simple act of raising land from water was a thread in a story that has not yet ended. The work continues. The gardens, though diminished, still breathe. The legacy of mud lives on. The sun has set on our story, on the great city of Tenochtitlan and the quiet, green canals of the China, MPA farmers. The echoes of the market have faded. The rhythm of the paddle has ceased, and the rich, dark earth of the garden is resting now. Under the soft gaze of the moon and the stars, feel the gentle rocking of the canoe as it drifts in the cool evening water. The air is still, carrying the faint, sweet scent of night, minus blooming flowers and damp soil. The hard work of the day is done. The harvest is in. The trades are made, and the soil is prepared for a new beginning that will wait for the morning sun. There is nothing left to do now but rest. Let the quiet lapping of the water against the shore be a gentle rhythm that slows your breathing. Each soft sound is a whisper from the past, a story of resilience, of a people who built their world from the water up. Allow your thoughts to drift, to float away like a canoe on a calm canal, moving slowly, effortlessly, into the peaceful waters of sleep. The worries of the day can be left on the shore. Here, in this quiet, floating world, there is only peace. You are safe, you are calm, and you are drifting into a deep and restorative dream. The end of the article. Good night.